Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I'm also the host of Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight, and I'm the editor of the anthology, which you should run out and buy, called Moms Don't Have Time to, a Quarantine Anthology. All proceeds of that book go to COVID-19 vaccine research. And I'm the editor-in-chief of Moms Don't Have Time to Write, a new publication on Medium, and we're accepting submissions, so please send your personal essays there. And if all that isn't enough, you can follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens, and my website is zibbyowens.com. Okay, now back to this amazing podcast. Karin Tanabe is the author of A Woman of Intelligence, a novel. Karin is also the author of 100 Suns and The Gilded Years, which is soon to be a major motion picture starring Zendaya, who will produce alongside Reese Witherspoon and Hello Sunshine. A former Politico reporter, her writing has been featured in The Washington Post, Miami Herald, Chicago Tribune, and Newsday. She has appeared as a celebrity and politics expert on Entertainment Tonight, CNN, and CBS Early Show. A graduate of Vassar College, Karin lives in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Karin. Thanks so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss A Woman of Intelligence.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I really loved this book, but also loved this outfit, by the way, on the cover.
Thank you. You know, I'm going to admit, the art department at St. Martin's almost killed me because I made them change the bag, I think, 4 times. I was like, not the right bag. It's still not the right bag. I mean, it was perfect. Honestly, the cover looked just like this. We changed nothing except the bag.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love the wallpaper or whatever, that pattern. I feel like I should have been born at this time. I like these clothes more, I think I would have done well then.
Yeah, the clothes are unbelievable. Though I have to say, the maintenance to look that good all the time, it seems exhausting.
That's true. But there was less to do. You didn't have email. You didn't have to do emails.
I know. Email is the reason we don't do our hair every day. That's the reason.
Pretty much. If it weren't for email, I would look like this right now.
Same. I would be exactly like this right now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So your book, do you want to tell listeners what it's about? I kind of hate asking authors this question, but I do think people want to know, or I could just summarize it either way.
No, I'm happy to summarize it. So basically, I like to call it a book about a woman who really loses her way through motherhood in the 1950s, who had a sparkling career as a translator at the UN, and then kind of gets locked in this domestic cage, as happened so much in the 50s. And she hits rock bottom. She really is in the throes of what we now call postpartum depression. And there's really nowhere to go but up or very down. But she's had a moment. She's like, I need to do something with my life. I'm in a very bad place. And right at that time, she's approached by the FBI to spy on a former lover from her college days who is now pretty high up in Soviet intelligence. And she decides to do it, starts lying to her husband, starts spending less time with her children. And it really gives her a new lease on life, a new identity. She really finds herself again in that role and having a purpose outside of the house. And I hope it resonates not just with mothers, but anyone who's had to, wanted to redefine themselves in their lives, who looked in the mirror and said, this isn't the person I want to be. What can I do to get there?
I love it. It's really, all the feelings about motherhood could be today. I mean, this could be on a blog or something. I could, my friends at coffee, these are they transcend time, some of these feelings, especially the way that they are not so openly discussed, right? I feel like it's midway through the book when she's talking to her mother-in-law about, what it's really like and why do people not talk about it? And why is it so hard to have kids and so soul sucking at times, right? Now I feel like it's a lot more socially appropriate to wallow and admit it, although not 100%, you could joke about it, but then I feel like she didn't have an outlet, and here's this super smart woman, knows 1,000 languages and has all this ambition and talent and beauty and drive, and her gorgeous husband on Fifth Avenue just wants her to hang around the house and take care of the kids.
Yeah. And that was the case for so many women in the 50s. It was all these highly intelligent, educated women, got their degrees or were just very smart on their own and then were locked in their houses and they were told. I think the hardest thing for me looking back on that time is like, you were supposed to be fulfilled. You had to be fulfilled. And if you weren't fulfilled by that role, something was wrong with you. And I think I can't imagine having been in that position. And what you said today, I think there's a lot more room to talk about how, for some women, being a mother isn't totally fulfilling. It can be very, very hard. But I still think there is this stigma about, around talking about it. Every time I've talked about it, people will be like, but you love your kids, right? And I'm like, well, of course I love my kids, but that's not the issue. We don't have to always go in asterisk, I love my kids when we are talking about how hard it is,
It's sort of funny. It's like everyone, like if you said to people in all these different jobs, like, okay, and now I'd like you to put aside this job and you are going to become a full-time live-in nanny.
Yeah.
They'd be like, well, I'm not sure I have the skill set for that. Or like, oh, I don't know. I'm not always that patient. Or I might really miss like whatever. That's not the job I picked. And yet that's essentially, I know they're your own kids, but the skill set involved, the skills you need and the actions you take when you're at home with your kids, which I was for many years, like, there all of a sudden you're like, well, what about all those other things too? Where do they go? Like, where does it all go? And sometimes I like look at what I'm doing now even, and I'm like, all of this, like but I wasn't doing anything at all. I was on the floor every day with the kids and like, like where does all that extra energy go? Like, I'm not surprised that what's her nickname? Rena gets like depressed, right? Because it's like you're an injured athlete, right? You're an athlete who can't do their thing.
Totally. And you're an injured athlete and you're supposed to be fine with it. I think that's the main issue is it's like, oh, you're benched from the thing you spent all this time and energy learning how to do, but don't you love it? And I think that's, she has a friend who just adores motherhood. And she's like, isn't this just the greatest thing that ever happened to you? And Rita's like, she doesn't say it at the time because you couldn't say it, but she's like, no, it's really, truly not the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
There's different parts of you that get fulfilled. Like there's nothing, the love you feel for your kids, that will fill my heart forever and my soul and whatever, but it's not necessarily going to fill my mind every minute. And I don't know why it should be okay to dissect those too. Like, yes, this is amazing and full of love and has changed me forever, but it's not, it's not taking that box that I had been, right? So something is still empty that can't get filled because it's like a different, right? It's like having two gas tanks in two different cars.
Totally. And I think sometimes when you love your kids so much, which is wonderful, you don't pay attention to loving yourself. And I think that sometimes, I certainly did. You wake up one day, you look in the mirror and you're like, but what happened to me? Where did my own self-love go? Where did the person who I was before kids go? And that's something that I really dealt with and emotionally put into the book. So you'll read a lot of that.
No, after I read the book, I went on your Instagram and I was like, all right, how old are her kids? I'm like, what phase is she? Are they still this young? What's going on with her?
Zibby, they feel like they've been babies forever.
They look a little older now, though. How old are they?
A little older, yeah. When I was writing it, they were 3 and 4. Now they're 4 and 5. So,
okay.
Rumor has it they grow up and life gets a little easier.
It gets very different. I'm now finally out of preschool. I have 6 and 8 and 14 and 14, but it's different in a new way. But it's not as physical, which I think is nice. These moments where, she's getting all the bodily fluids of her kids all over her. And oh my gosh, the best scene in the whole book, I think, is like when her son gets injured and she doesn't know he has glass in his knee. And she's just standing there and she just like can't motivate herself to pick him up. Like, of course, then the husband sees, but I totally understood that. Not like I could just so put myself in her shoes in that moment. And then the judgment, the external judgment, how it's so not fair, right? No one saw what she went through except us as the reader, right? And so we get it, but still like nothing becomes excusable. I don't know. It was great.
I think every mom has had that moment. I remember my son was a baby and my daughter was 2 and I was trying to take her to preschool. And I had one of these like big strollers, double strollers. And she just was like raging so much that it tipped over in a crosswalk in the middle of one of the biggest streets in Washington, D.C. And I was like, oh, and you kind of don't know what to do. It's so overwhelming. Obviously, you want to pick your kids up out of the street. But like, I just remember all these people watching me and nobody helping me, just everybody like looking at me, embarrassed for me or not wanting to look at me because they didn't want to help me. And I was just like, I wrote a line in the book that says like a woman of young children, just you're in a ring of chaos all the time.
Yes.
You walk into a restaurant with your 4 kids and no one wants to be seated near you and no one wants to listen to your family. And it can be very tough.
I had the same thing. I had the double stroller and I had to go down like 2 steps and I was by myself. And so we went down the first step and then like it caught or something. So the stroller, I was like this about to fall over myself and the kids were just dangling from their like straps, and I was like, help, but they're like, who's going to help me? A stranger is going to come rescue me on this. Anyway, I finally figured it out, but yeah, it's no fun. But yet you took all that emotion and then you made it this whole other story with like intrigue and sophistication. And I loved that. So it's not just like you're sitting around like moping about the mom condition, if you will, but you took us all on this interesting ride. And I feel like when I think about 1950s housewife, I immediately go to the suburbs, right? Like that's the trope or whatever. You hardly ever read about 1950s housewives on Fifth Avenue, right? Like, what was that like? And as an Upper East Sider myself, I'm particularly interested in like, what would that have been like? Like, okay, interesting. So because in New York, like as it is now, you just are constantly with other people and seeing what you're missing. And I feel like maybe in the suburb, I don't know. I mean, what did you think about sort of this time period in the city versus like what we kind of hear about elsewhere?
Yeah, I think one of the big themes is seeing what you're missing. I think, in the suburbs, there's certainly that sort of like, oh, mom taking too many happy pills in the suburbs because she's so bored. But I think sometimes not seeing all this stuff all the time can be a little helpful. I remember when I first had a baby and I walked through the city like on a Saturday morning and I saw all these young women having brunch and just like the rage I felt against these poor innocent women. I was like, damn, all of you able to have brunch. Pajamas, unwashed hair, and this baby who hasn't slept all night. I was like, what I would give for brunch. So I think it's a hard part for Rena. I mean, she sits at her window in Fifth Avenue and watches people a lot and thinks about, I used to be this woman and I'm so far away from this woman now. And also just the pulse of New York City post-war. And there was such an energy, right? I mean, things changed. There was the Cold War then, and there were other difficulties, but this, like, we made it out of the war. There's this jubilance to the city, which she experienced, when she was a UN translator, and now she's cut off from it. And that's tough for her.
And even all the men and how you describe like their whole raging social life and all the available people who are like looking to meet her and the party, like all that stuff. Yeah. It's like, oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. Post-war New York, I think, when I did my research, it sounded like so much fun. It's sort of like the way people talk about what life will be like after the pandemic, or even after you get vaccinated. I remember going out and just being like, this is amazing. I have a new lease on life. It's exciting.
The problem with that is that not everybody's vaccinated. Like, I still felt that way too, but it's not like the war's not over yet.
Right. No, the war's definitely not over.
I know. So but it's coming back.
Coming there, but coming back. Hopefully soon.
I hadn't heard about the Long Island Railroad crashes.
Yeah, me neither. It's sort of terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Don't read this book on the LIRR.
Yeah, right.
Safety measures have gotten better. But yeah, so that came up because the United Nations used to be on Long Island, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that either. Would have spared us a lot of traffic, by the way, for UN week. It wouldn't be bad if it were still there, but just saying, okay, keep going.
Move it back out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before it was in the heart of Manhattan, it was on Long Island. And the people who worked there took, the Long Island Railroad to get to work. And one year there was this horrible crash. I mean, reading about it and talking about, like, people were saying it's just a sardine can filled with blood. I was like, well, that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
But it's also another reason Rena's husband wants her to stop working. He's saying,
Right.
now you're pregnant. This is dangerous. You're going to quit your job anyway. This is just another reason to quit now.
So ironic too, when he really wants her to quit and everything. And he's this like big shot pediatric surgeon and all the rest. And like, he's spending his whole life taking care of kids, and all she wants is for him to take care of their kids. Right. Yeah. And she cannot get him to focus. It's like so cruel, really.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the reasons I made him a surgeon with kids, was to sort of show like, I'm willing to spend all my time with these kids because it's my job, but my own kids, like, they just need to be raised by my wife, and that's fine.
Yeah. Not so fine. Wow. Well, super interesting. And I don't know, I wanted to ask you about the bruising. What was up with that? Did you hear, I'm not explaining myself. I'm speaking so informally. So
I know what you're talking about.
Okay. So Rena has a coping mechanism, which is sort of like digging her hands into her legs, right? And also sometimes digging in her fingernails into like the benches, and she has all this like pushing sort of, and it comes, now she gets bruises, and her husband at one point finally is like, what are we going to do about this? And she didn't even know he kind of even noticed. So where did that come from? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So she's, at the time people didn't really talk about postpartum, but she's in it. I mean, she's really having it. And for her, it's self-harming, it's a coping mechanism sort of to take the pain of her mind and put it into her body. It's when I'm anxious or really nervous, it's something I do to a lesser extent, or I'll go on a run, or I'll have to sprint down the block, or something to just move the brain into the body. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely taken from, a habit I've had for a while, but she takes it to an extreme where she really is self-harming to really think about her body. And for her, I also want to do it to be like, she's trying to get her body back, not in a like, oh, I want to get my body back to look great sense, but in a like ownership way, where she was pregnant back to back. She's been breastfeeding for years. She has these kids clawing all, on her all day, as we all know when we have young kids. And she just wants to possess herself again. And that's definitely part of that journey.
Interesting. So tell me about your process and everything. And also, so you have a book that's being turned into a movie as well, like as we speak. Yeah. So what's going on with that?
Well, it's been a slow journey. We're not aided by COVID at all. But my third book, The Gilded Years, which is about the first Black graduate of Vassar College. I also went to Vassar. She graduated in 1897, passed as white. And then her roommate at the very end found out she was Black, hired a private detective to follow her family around and tried to keep her from graduating.
Oh my gosh.
Big scandal at the time. This is 1897, of course, a true story. And then a story that kind of got forgotten over the years. So I ended up turning it into a book, and it came out in 2016, and it was almost bought. We had like all these great Hollywood calls, and I was so excited. And then everybody disappeared. And I was like, but Hollywood, where And then over almost 2 years later, a year and a half later, my agent called me and was like, Reese Witherspoon called and she wants to buy your book. So I was thrilled that none of those other people had bought it, because then Reese couldn't have bought it. So sometimes things happen for a reason.
Wow.
That's exciting. Very exciting.
So what stage is it in now?
I think it's still in rewrites. It was written, rewritten, still there, but hopefully we'll get moving faster now that, well, who knows? I'm not going to say anything about Hollywood, but hopefully it'll just keep moving forward.
This timing is, I mean, I know that's so trite. Timing is everything, but I feel like there are forces at work when like we want something and it doesn't happen then. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Like it feels like it's never going to happen, but it might. It just might not be in that form at that time.
Totally. And I've learned patience. Woman of Intelligence is my 6th book. And I've really learned that a lot of it is you just focus on the product and the next product, and you try to make them good, and they're out there, and whatever happens. And the more books you have, the more opportunities you have. And it's kind of out of your hands. I mean, once it's optioned. It's not like you can just call them every day and be like, so, please, how about that movie? Even though sometimes
update, question mark, question mark,
Yes.
question mark.
I know there's a voice in my head that's like, Karin, let's be sane. So you keep yourself from doing that. But yeah, you just never know. I mean, I hope this one ends up on the screen eventually. It's obviously a very emotional journey for me. So we shall see about that too.
And are you working on another book now?
Oh, of course. Another pandemic baby. I have a book that's due at the end of August. So I'm writing that, well, quicker and quicker every day.
Can you say anything about it? A little sneak preview?
It's set in the 1970s. It's set in 1977 in Los Angeles. And it's just fun. Honestly, it is like a celebration. It's like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's fun. I think after writing A Woman of Intelligence and the amount of like my own personal journey, pain with motherhood that I put in, I was like, okay, that has been done. And now I need to attend the party. So yeah, this book is fun.
That's awesome. Wow. I can't wait to read that. Where do you have the characters living in LA?
Yeah. So mostly just like in the heart of LA on Sunset Strip is where a lot of the action happens. There's a vintage store that one of my characters owns on that street. So I've also been like, going to parties and shopping through my mind in this book.
Awesome. I used to live right off that strip for a couple of years, right after college. It was super fun. Yeah. Like right there.
I'm sure it was super fun.
It was very fun. But I was like, if I'm going to move to LA, and it was for this boy I was dating, I was like, we have to live somewhere that's as New York as possible.
Oh. Not Calabasas.
Right. Yeah. Not Calabasas. I like never even went to the Valley. But no, I was like, I have to be able to walk. I have to walk to a bookstore. So yeah. Anyway, well, that sounds awesome. So any advice for aspiring authors?
Don't do it. Just kidding. That was my dad's advice to me. So my dad
no.
I know. He was an editor for the Washington Post Book World for the book section.
Oh,
so
no way.
Just surrounded by books. And honestly, how could I not become an author when that's how you grow up? But he was like, here's my advice. Don't become a writer. You'll be overworked and underpaid. And I mean, he wasn't wrong per se, but it's like... It's like if both your parents are hockey players, you played hockey your whole life, and they're like, don't become a hockey player. You're like, but what else would I do? So no, my advice for aspiring writers, I think my advice is like, at first, especially, maybe always, like quantity over quality, because you can always get quality later. I think people get scared when their first drafts are bad, or their first couple paragraphs or pages are quote unquote bad. Like, they think, oh, I can't do this. And look at these sentences. They're not as polished as I want them to be. But like, you just got to kind of spit it out and then fix it later. And, I just sent my draft of my new book to a friend, and she was like, the beginning's great, amazing. And I was like, well, I worked on the first 4 chapters for so long because that's what I sent to my editor to read early. And I was like, probably falls apart later because I haven't had time yet to work on it. Work on it. But yeah, I always liken the process to painting, right? You have to do a sketch first. And like the Mona Lisa didn't look like the Mona Lisa when it was just like a pencil or whatever, charcoal. I don't know what they used back then, drawing. But it just takes like layers and layers and layers. So yeah, don't be afraid to write badly. Try to write a lot. Try to write every day. And don't be intimidated by extremely good books. If you read a book and you're like, I can never do this, then pick up a really bad book and just be like, actually, I can do this. Like, no problem.
I'm writing a memoir now, and it's also due at the end of August, by the way.
Yes.
And I have like a draft I just sent in this weekend, but as I was like working on it, I read Suleika Jawad's Between Two Kingdoms. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, it's so good. Anyway, it's like
only great things.
It's such a beautiful memoir, and anyway, so I literally, I shouldn't even say this now. I emailed my editor. I was just like, I just read Suleika. Like, my book is terrible. Like, it's nothing like this book. This is the best book I've ever read. Like, my book is as if I'm talking to a friend, just like this. I don't have like that story. And she's like, that's okay. That's not your voice. That's not your story. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep going. I can't tell that story, and I'm not her, and she's amazing, and I'm glad I can read it. But like, we can't all write the books, every book we want to read. We all have to write the books we can write.
Yeah.
That's my
absolutely.
profound advice from, halfway through this.
I think I would give that advice too, is like, be genuine to your voice. I mean, I remember I tried to write once a book set in the South, and I am not from the South. I have never lived in the South, and I've spent very little time in the South. So I don't know what possessed me to think I could write something set in the South. I mean, I live in DC, like I go to Virginia, but it's South. And it did not work. I mean, luckily I'm able to self-edit enough that I was like, wow, this is horrible. And you will never see a book from me set in the South because I don't know it and I can't do it. So, and people from the South would be like, well, you're definitely not from here, And I'm not saying like, oh, you have to know your world so intimately or anything, but like once you start with a voice, like it just has to feel genuine enough.
Totally. Well, I think you should figure out how to sell some of these dresses, or like have a party where we all show up wearing this
all
dress.
Yellow.
Or maybe you've already done that and I wasn't invited because I'm just meeting you now. Or maybe you wouldn't have wanted to invite me anyway. But we should go to like Tavern on the Green in these like amazing color-coded outfits with the gloves and the whole shebang, and like have it be like a costume party or something.
I mean, I would love that so much. Yeah. The only rule is that all of your clothes must be the exact same color, because she has a yellow dress, yellow gloves, a yellow coat, and a yellow bag. And I'm just going to assume she's wearing yellow shoes.
Yeah.
Which I remember getting it and being like, that's a lot of yellow. And then being like, and I love it.
Yeah. I love it.
I think it really pops. So I am all for this. I have not had any parties or any outings as glamorous as that lately. So
there we go. Okay. In the fall.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. Invite all your intelligent friends. It could be like
all my women of
right?
intelligence.
Yeah. Are you a woman of intelligence? Come to this party. Okay. All right. Not like you need more help on marketing this book, but anyway.
No, I always take help.
Well, congratulations. It was really fantastic. I truly enjoyed reading it, and it was great to meet you.
It was great to meet you too. And good luck with your memoirs. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you. They won't be like Suleika's, so.
But amazing in their own way. I mean, that's what you always have to remember. Think about all the books you like and how different they are.
That's true.
That's a good way to look at it.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.